I want to start there because what I am about to share today could easily be mistaken for an attack on medicine, and it is not. Most physicians are hardworking, genuinely caring people doing an extraordinarily difficult job inside a system that was never designed to give them enough time to tell you everything you need to know. Your doctor is not your enemy, but the system your doctor operates inside of. The 15-minute appointment, the insurance-driven checklist, the pharmaceutical model of care that frames almost every human problem as a condition requiring a corresponding prescription. That system has significant and consequential gaps. And those gaps fall hardest on people over 65, not because anyone intended it that way, but because the result is the same regardless of intention. There are things that would genuinely change your health, your cognition, your energy, and the number of years you live well, not just the number of years you live, that you have almost certainly never heard in a clinical setting. Not because they are secret, not because they are controversial, but because the architecture of modern medicine was built around treating disease after it arrives, not preventing it before it does. And prevention, by its nature, rarely fits inside 15 minutes. What I am going to share with you today is grounded in science, real science, conducted by real researchers at institutions whose names you would recognize. But it is science that lives largely in academic journals and research presentations rather than in the examination rooms where most seniors receive their care. And the distance between those two places, between what researchers know and what patients are told, is a distance that has real consequences for real people every single day. So let us close that distance, starting right now. The first thing your doctor will almost certainly never tell you, not because it is wrong, but because the conversation almost never gets that far, is that the single most powerful determinant of how you age after 65 is not the medications in your cabinet. It is the muscle on your body, not your cardiovascular fitness, not your flexibility, not your weight, at least not in the way the number on the scale is typically discussed, your muscle mass. Specifically, whether you are actively maintaining it or passively losing it, because after 65, there is no neutral. There is only maintaining or losing, and the default direction, without deliberate resistance, is always loss. Sarcopenia, the medical term for age-related muscle loss, affects an estimated 30% of people over 60 and more than half of people over 80, according to data published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle. And the consequences extend so far beyond physical strength that most people have no idea they are connected at all. Muscle tissue is metabolically active in ways that fat tissue is not. It produces compounds called myokines, signaling molecules that act on the brain, the immune system, the liver, and the cardiovascular system in ways that researchers are still working to fully understand, but that are already recognized as profoundly protective against the diseases most associated with aging. Low muscle mass is independently associated with increased risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, depression, dementia, and all-cause mortality, independently, meaning that the association holds even when you control for every other variable. The muscle itself is doing something essential that nothing else adequately replaces. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, a physician who has spent her career focusing specifically on muscle-centric medicine, has argued in her research and clinical work that the current medical paradigm focuses almost entirely on the diseases of fat accumulation while largely ignoring the diseases of muscle loss, and that this blind spot is costing aging adults their health in ways that are entirely preventable. She describes skeletal muscle as the organ of longevity, not the heart, not the brain, the muscle, because of what it does for every other system in the body when it is maintained and what happens to every other system when it is not. Your doctor may have told you to lose weight. Your doctor has almost certainly not told you to build muscle, with the same urgency, the same specificity, and the same clarity about what is at stake if you do not. That asymmetry is one of the most consequential gaps in the standard care most seniors receive. Resistance exercise twice a week, not marathon training, not extreme effort, Resistance, working against load, whether that is a set of dumbbells, a resistance band, a set of body weight exercises, or a properly supervised session with a trainer who understands the needs of older bodies. The research behind this recommendation is not marginal. It is among the most replicated findings in geroscience, the emerging field dedicated specifically to the biology of aging. It is the closest thing to a miracle intervention that actually exists without any of the side effects listed on the back of a prescription bottle. The second thing your doctor will almost never tell you, and this one tends to land with a particular kind of force when people hear it for the first time, is that chronic inflammation is almost certainly active inside your body right now, and that it is the common root beneath most of the conditions your doctor is treating as separate problems. Heart disease, arthritis, type 2 diabetes, cognitive decline, depression, certain cancers. These are not unrelated conditions that happen to arrive at similar times in your life. In the overwhelming majority of cases, they are different expressions of the same underlying biological process, a state of persistent, low-grade immune activation that researchers now call inflammaging, a portmanteau of inflammation and aging that has appeared in thousands of peer-reviewed papers over the past 2 decades. The concept is not new. Dr. Claudio Franceschi, an Italian immunologist and gerontologist, first described inflammaging in research published at the turn of this century, and the scientific literature surrounding it has since grown into one of the most active areas in all of biomedical research. The core finding is this: as we age, the immune system loses its ability to turn off cleanly after responding to threats. Inflammatory signals that should activate, do their job, and then resolve instead remain partially elevated, creating a background state of chronic immune activation that, over years and decades, damages tissues, accelerates cellular aging, and creates the biological conditions in which virtually every major age-related disease thrives. What drives this process? Several things, and nearly all of them are modifiable. A diet high in refined sugars and ultra-processed foods is one of the most potent pro-inflammatory forces in the human body. Chronic poor sleep is another. Sedentary behavior, untreated depression, social isolation, which, as research from the University of California, Los Angeles has demonstrated, activates the same inflammatory gene expression pathways as a physical wound. Excess visceral fat, which is itself an endocrine tissue producing inflammatory cytokines continuously. Every single one of these drivers is addressable, not with a prescription, with choices, specific, evidence-backed, entirely accessible choices that do not require a specialist referral or an insurance authorization or a follow-up appointment in 6 weeks. What calms systemic inflammation? The same Mediterranean dietary pattern that has appeared in more longevity research than almost any other single intervention. Regular physical movement, sufficient, well-structured sleep, meaningful social connection, stress reduction practices. And here, the research on something as simple and cost-free as 20 minutes of daily quiet sitting has become robust enough that major medical centers, including the Cleveland Clinic and Massachusetts General Hospital, have integrated mindfulness-based programs into their standard care offerings, not as alternative medicine, but as evidence-based clinical practice. The point is not that your medications are wrong. The point is that if the inflammation driving the conditions those medications are treating is never addressed at its source, you are managing downstream consequences indefinitely while the upstream cause continues uninterrupted. Your doctor is downstream. The choices you make every day are upstream, and nobody told you that clearly enough. The third thing your doctor will almost never tell you, and perhaps the one I feel most strongly about sharing today, is that your gut is running your brain. And right now, after 65, that relationship deserves your serious and urgent attention. The human gut contains approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other microscopic life forms that collectively constitute what researchers call the gut microbiome. The scientific understanding of this system has undergone a revolution in the past 15 years so significant that it has genuinely reframed how researchers understand almost every aspect of human health. And its implications for people over 65 are profound in ways that clinical medicine has been startlingly slow to communicate. The gut and the brain are in continuous two-way communication via what neuroscientists call the gut-brain axis, a network of neural, hormonal, and immune signals running primarily through the vagus nerve that connects the enteric nervous system in your gut to your central nervous system in ways that make the relationship between these two organs genuinely bidirectional. Your gut does not simply respond to your brain. Your brain, to a degree that would have seemed improbable 30 years ago, responds to your gut. Approximately 90% of the body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter most associated with mood stability, emotional regulation, and the prevention of depression, is produced not in the brain, but in the gut. The composition of your microbiome directly influences how much of it gets made, how it gets transported, and how effectively the brain can use it. Researchers at institutions including the Karolinska Institute in Sweden and University College Cork in Ireland have now published extensive evidence linking microbiome disruption. Specifically, the reduction in microbial diversity that occurs naturally with age and is dramatically accelerated by repeated antibiotic courses, a highly processed diet, and chronic stress, with elevated rates of depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, and neurodegeneration in older adults. Here is why this matters specifically at 65 and beyond. The diversity of the human gut microbiome, the variety of different microbial species present, and the richness of their interactions tends to decline with age. This is not inevitable. It is driven substantially by factors that are modifiable. A diet low in fiber and fermented foods, high in processed ingredients, is one of the most destructive forces to microbial diversity that researchers have identified. The average American diet, which studies suggest most seniors over 65 are largely following, consistently produces the kind of microbiome associated with higher inflammation, poorer immune function, and worse cognitive outcomes. Fermented foods, real yogurt with live cultures, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, are among the most reliably microbiome-supportive foods identified in current research. A Stanford University study published in the journal Cell in 2021 found that a diet high in fermented foods significantly increased microbiome diversity and reduced multiple inflammatory markers, including some associated with cognitive decline, in ways that a high-fiber diet alone did not fully replicate. These are not expensive interventions. They do not require a prescription. They require only the knowledge that they matter, and that knowledge is what the 15-minute appointment rarely provides. The fourth thing your doctor will almost never tell you is that the story you tell yourself about aging is, in a measurable and biological sense, shaping the way you age. This sounds like the kind of thing that belongs on a motivational calendar rather than in a serious conversation about health. I understand why. But the science behind it is now substantial enough that dismissing it as sentiment does a real disservice to the people who could benefit most from understanding it. Dr. Becca Levy, a professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health, has spent over 3 decades researching the relationship between age-related self-perceptions and actual health outcomes. Her findings are consistently and sometimes strikingly counterintuitive. In one landmark study, people who held more positive views about their own aging lived an average of 7.5 years longer than those with more negative self-perceptions, an effect that remained significant even after controlling for age, gender, socioeconomic status, loneliness, and functional health. 7.5 years. From a belief. From the story a person carried internally about what it meant to be the age they were. The biological mechanisms underlying this finding are now better understood than they once were. Chronic negative self-perception activates stress response pathways. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the sympathetic nervous system, in ways that elevate cortisol, suppress immune function, and create the same kind of inflammatory conditions already described. The body, quite literally, responds to psychological states with physiological changes. And a mind that has absorbed the cultural message that aging is decline, that the years after 65 are primarily years of loss, that the best is behind you and maintenance is the highest reasonable aspiration, that mind is sending messages to the body that the body faithfully executes. The inverse is equally true. Seniors who maintain a strong sense of purpose, who feel that their days matter, that they are contributing something, that the world is still genuinely interested in what they have to offer, show measurably different biological profiles than those who have allowed purpose to quietly retire along with their career. Research from Rush University Medical Center found that a strong sense of purpose was associated with reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease, stroke, and cardiovascular events over a follow-up period of years, not correlated with better moods, associated with reduced incidence of the diseases that kill. Purpose is not a luxury. It is not the philosophical icing on an otherwise complete life. It is, by the best available evidence, a biological input, something your body uses the same way it uses sleep and nutrition and movement to maintain the systems that keep you alive and keep your mind clear. And yet, when was the last time your doctor asked you whether you feel a sense of purpose? When did a clinical appointment last explore whether you wake in the morning with a reason that genuinely compels you? These conversations do not happen in the current model of care, not because they are unimportant, but because the model was never built to hold them. The fifth thing your doctor will almost never tell you, and perhaps the most actionable of everything I have shared today, is that you have significantly more biological agency over the next decade of your life than modern medicine's passive framing of aging has ever suggested. The Human Genome Project, completed in the early 2000s, was expected to reveal genetic destiny, to show us clearly which diseases were written into our DNA and therefore inevitable. What it revealed instead was something far more complicated and ultimately far more hopeful. The emerging field of epigenetics, the study of how gene expression is regulated by environmental and behavioral factors, has demonstrated repeatedly and across multiple research contexts that our genes do not simply switch on and switch off according to a predetermined script. They respond to inputs, to what we eat, how we move, how we sleep, who we spend time with, what we believe about ourselves, how much chronic stress we carry, and dozens of other factors that were once considered lifestyle variables rather than biological levers. Dr. Dean Ornish, the physician and researcher whose decades-long work on lifestyle medicine produced some of the most rigorously documented findings in the field, demonstrated in research published with Nobel Prize-winning scientist Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn that intensive lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, stress management, social support, could measurably lengthen telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes whose erosion is directly associated with cellular aging and disease risk. Telomeres were once thought to be essentially one-directional. They shortened, and that was that. The research showed something different. The direction could be influenced. The biology was not fixed. It was listening. This is what nobody tells you clearly enough. Your biology is listening to you right now. Every choice you make today is communicating something to the systems that govern how you age, how your brain functions, how your immune system performs, and how many more years you spend genuinely well rather than merely alive. You are not a passive recipient of a predetermined aging process. You are, within meaningful limits that science is still working to fully define, an active participant in one that responds to what you do. None of this is a guarantee. I want to be honest about that. Genetics matter. Circumstances matter. History matters. Not everything is within any individual's control, and pretending otherwise would be its own form of dishonesty. But the gap between what most seniors over 65 believe is possible for their health trajectory and what the research actually supports is wide enough and consequential enough that naming it clearly felt like the most important thing I could do today. You are not beyond the reach of improvement. Your brain is not finished changing. Your muscle is not finished building. Your inflammation is not beyond reduction. Your microbiome is not beyond restoration. Your sense of purpose is not beyond recovery. Your story about what aging means, the one you inherited from a culture that has never been particularly honest about what later life can actually look like, is not beyond revision. The appointment is 15 minutes. The rest of your life is yours. Use it differently than you have been told to. Move with resistance twice a week and understand that the muscle you build is doing things for your brain and your heart and your immune system that nothing else replicates. Reduce the processed food and the refined sugar and understand that the inflammation driving the conditions on your medication list has dietary roots that a pill cannot reach. Feed your microbiome the fermented foods and the fiber it is almost certainly not receiving, and understand that your mood, your cognition, and your immune function are downstream of that ecology. Find the thing that makes your morning matter and protect it with the same seriousness you bring to any other health intervention, because the research says it belongs in that category. And revise, honestly and deliberately, the story you carry about what it means to be the age you are, because your body is reading that story continuously and responding to it in ways you can measure. Your doctor means well. The system is doing what it was built to do, but it was built to treat disease, and you deserve something more than that. You deserve the information that lets you prevent it. The information that lets you actively, deliberately, with full understanding of what the evidence supports, participate in how the rest of your life unfolds. That information exists. Most of it has existed for years. And today, as completely and honestly as I know how, I have tried to make sure you have it. Take it seriously, take it home, take it into tomorrow morning, and let it change what you do before breakfast, what you put on your plate at lunch, who you call in the afternoon, and what you tell yourself quietly and honestly before you go to sleep tonight. You are 65 or older. That is not the beginning of the end. Given everything science now understands about what that age still has available to it, it might just be the beginning of the most intentional chapter you have ever lived. Go live it like you know that, because now you do.